we interrupt this program to bring you the Design Hustle podcast, conversations around successful design journeys. Take it away, Ali.
I just got done speaking with Peter Boersma, the former design operations manager from Miro, and he's worked in companies like IKEA, ServiceNow, and a lot of other interesting ones. Our conversation was all about a topic which has been a bit of a blind spot for me, design operations, design ops for short. And I asked him questions like, what does it take a person like me become a person like you in terms of having the same skill set? And he had amazing things to share. We kept the conversation really high level to make it more accessible for everyone. And this is what he had to say. Peter Boersma, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Ali.
So, something that I always sort of think about when I'm reaching out, cold reach out to people I have not really spoken to before. One of the biggest fears that I have, of course, is imposter syndrome that comes in and says like, okay, do I even deserve to reach out to people who have already achieved that summit that I would maybe like to understand about, right? And then people like you just sometimes reach back and say like, listen, I'm more than happy to be part of the show. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I am. I like to share my lessons learned. I'm happy to help this way, help others learn lessons that I've learned, or at least understand them. They don't need to take them on. And I want the field of UX to be more widely known and in all its aspects. So I'm happy to join you.
It's a great segue. So can you sort of introduce yourself as, let's say, to people who don't understand UX per se? It's like a broader design world where architects, designers, UXers are all there. So maybe let's start from there. Who you are, what you do, how would you define it?
Yeah. Let's see. There's so many ways to do this. I can start citing formal definitions of UX, but that doesn't help. Maybe it helps that to tell that when I was a kid, I was supposed to be good with computers. So people said you need to study computer science, and then it turned out that computer science was all about the inside of the machine, like wires, chips, video drivers, connecting one computer to another. And that's not why I was excited about computers. I was excited because of the things it could do for people. The experiences it could give users, user experience. So that's where my drive comes from. And I finished officially computer science, but I kicked out some mandatory courses, took in courses from educational science, from business science, from cognitive science, to make it more about people and the impact that computers have on people. And that's what I think the field of UX is about. Designing stuff that has hopefully positive impact on people through the use of computers, internet, interactive systems and stuff like that. And that's what I've been doing all throughout my career. So I'm one of those people that studied something, or first had a hobby, then studied something, and then kept maintaining it as a career, which also means that my work is also my hobby. And I do things like this, being on podcasts or going to conferences and speak about the field, because I live it. This is who I am.
And I think that's very powerful, what you said there about your passion being your hobby and your work being your hobby. So if you find that perfect mix in life, like not everyone has it, of course, I think it leads to people doing great things, and as you said, like so when I say grit, right? So take it from a non-conventional what do you call it, definition of grit. So what I see grit is based on mostly impact, and the impact that you're having either within the organization or on the product that you're working on, or on the people that you're serving, community that you're part of. So not in terms of the absolute great in the world, great sort of a thing. So take it for whatever it's worth, right? But I want to ask you about something that really struck out. And so I remember my dad walking in 1985 or something. and he had like this big brown box in his hand. It was a second-hand Commodore 64. Uh, and when I was looking at your story and some of the speeches that you've already given, and I'm going to link all of these things down in the podcast below for people who would like to sort of have a look at more visual aspect of what you do, perhaps in terms of a presentation, they can have a look. But you mentioned Commodore 16, and I had no idea Commodore 16 existed. So what's that all about?
That was my first computer. I guess like you would the first computers I encountered was probably in a warehouse or in a mall where they would be on display and you could do little things and somebody else would have typed like line number 10 print hello, line number 20 go to 10, and if you ran that program it would say hello, 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 hello. That's probably my very first interaction with the computers, but then I was enthusiastic. My parents got me a Commodore 16, which had 16K of memory. And like, I don't know, like your listeners, if they look at an icon on one of their screens, that's more than 16K probably. If it's multicolored, it's definitely more than 16K. Um, and that was the space that I had. So I had to get very creative as well with writing programs. And I did write programs. I was writing programs for me. First the print hello and repeat it. Then just starting to draw lines. Then I don't know, little games. And as soon as I had one of these, like, some other friends would say, "Hey, I got a computer for Christmas as well. Let's share code and Commodore 16 code and the Atari codes or other these little computers with gummy keyboards."
Mhm.
The code wasn't interoperable, so you had to translate stuff or I don't know. It was hard, but also fun to explore that world on discovering code and other people's code. And one of the ways that I discovered it was through magazines that actually printed out listings of the code, and other people would type it over, and I would type over code from that magazine. And at some point, I submitted my games or my tools to that magazine, and it got published as well. And I think I got money enough to buy a bike or something.
That's fantastic.
So the Commodore 16 was my first computer. Yes.
So it's quite interesting how you put it, right? So I can try to sort of piece this thing together in my head where I see like a young kid, starting to understand that creativity can then be sort of channelized through different, let's say, hardware. And you see people or designers, let's say you talk to them and you try to understand how they started or got into design per se. And most of the times the entry point is hardware like a pencil, for example, or a pen or something, or maybe sometimes an instrument, a musical instrument, a car. Yeah. So was there anything else that was running parallel to you picking up coding? Were you doing anything else creatively per se?
I was drawing a lot, which was helped by my grandfather working in a print shop or a print a binder or a printer. So we always had paper whenever we went to a birthday from one of our family members. We would go home with a box of paper, multicolor paper. So we would, my brother and I would draw a lot, sometimes with the help of shapes in these plastic shapes to help you draw a fish or dinosaur or something, but also freehand. And I would draw a lot of cars, a lot of buildings, houses, and a lot of mountains and trees. Um, so that's the other way that I was creative. Um, yeah, other than that, it was sports. And I was interested in plays, in stage. So we would sign up with a friend from down the street, sign up for some kind of contest where whoever told the best joke would win cookies or something. Or at some point, I ended up in the school play and play Joseph or Maria or the donkey. Um, in the Christmas play. So that's the other ways that I was creative, I guess. My brother was actually much more creative. He went to school, to the painting school. He's still an artist. He makes the most beautiful stuff. Make graffiti as well, mostly legal, most sometimes illegal.
That's good. That's good. As long as you don't know. You know how they say, like, when you're doing a car review and you're doing the maximum, you're checking the maximum as a car reviewer, you should never take your video because then it's like legal evidence against how fast we've been going. So yeah, we're not going to talk about that. So great. So let me try to draw these strings together, right? So because I've been so what I generally do is I believe that a good conversation can unlock a lot of different ideas, a lot of different ways forward, a lot of different ways to look at a life that you think you know how it should be, So it's because we all have like our own idea of what life is, how people have lived is mostly completely differently. So we have someone in the family who generally says like business as usual leads to results as usual, right? So and then you have people like you and I consider myself as part of that. Like our journeys have been a little sporadic per se. So what I sort of learned from your experience, right, was, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So this is me trying to make sense of the information that is out there about you, and me trying to create this dream sketch in my head, right, and then validating it through this one-to-one discussion.
Yeah.
So you start off as a designer, interaction designer. Then somehow down the line you become a UX strategist, and then somehow down the line you start DevOps, and then you then Nero. Sorry, design ops. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, like this is exactly the problem. We don't talk about design ops enough for it to be part of our lingo, right? So yeah, and then somehow I hear you in that video mentioning that the first time you actually got paid for being a design up was in a company that had that structure, like which was in Miro, let's say a few years ago, right? And that was where you actually went from a mindset DevOps to like a role-defined DevOps person. And yeah, so I'm just going back to the images, the diagrams that you made for us. But I think they were very good, very clear for me to understand what this is. Right. So now let's go back and maybe you try to explain from your point of view what this journey was. What were you doing? How did you get started?
Yeah. Yes, let's say I started as a designer. In my first job interview, it was a small company, and the programmer of the company asked how many hours I wanted to program, like code. And I said 0, and he started at 20 hours per week. And we sort of settled on 5 hours a week maximum because I didn't want to code. I knew I wasn't the greatest coder in the world, definitely not. He was like a brilliant guy who would start, like overnight, create the next new version of the software or something. I wanted to design stuff and I wanted to learn about business. So I joined this small company, was allowed to be a designer and at some point project manager, and start to um, be exposed to the business sides of design work. Like how much does it cost? How long does it take? What are customers willing to pay for it? How often do they change their mind? So how many rounds of review do we need to build into our work? Those kinds of things I slowly learned at this small company that started growing. Um, and as we grew, I was asked to be a project manager, like I said, to be involved in sales conversations, um, to maintain software, which is a big chunk of the cost of software, just maintaining code, fixing it, upgrading it, stuff like that, and learn how to sort of manage a product. We sort of had an internal product that we used in our projects to client. We didn't tell them, but we used it as the basis of a lot of our work, sort of like a content management system. Um, Early one, because we're talking 1997 or something.
Wow.
Um, uh, and let's see. I started growing, and at some point, the company had grown and was bought by another company. And suddenly, we were headquartered in Helsinki. I had 500 colleagues instead of 50, um, and things needed to be structured. And one of the things that needed to be structured was the way design was done. Um, the, the I think the ultimate goal was to make the reporting about the work easier. But the goal that we were given, me and a team of other volunteers around the company, was to standardize the way design was done. And if you standardize the way design is done, then the reporting becomes easier. So that was the ultimate goal. But standardizing the way design was done was necessary because this company had bought like 10 little companies. They were all doing their work differently. I volunteered to become part of a team that standardized the way of working. And I realized I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed looking for best practices, for examples of good work, of maybe examples of failed work, of templates for work, of instructions for work, and all of that was to be created by this team. I became a member of the core team ultimately, working a lot with people from Helsinki headquarters, um, standardizing, creating training material, measuring the impact as we rolled out this new way of working that everyone was supposed to follow, um, measuring how much people knew, how much they liked it, whether they felt it was still effective, and all of that. And that was my first experience with like documenting ways of working, standardizing ways of working, slowly improving ways of working, um, in an effort to make designers more effective, and also to make their work measurable. And this is a chunk of what we now call design ops. Later, I worked on other aspects of design operations, design ops, like building career ladders, defining responsibilities for the different um, seniority levels. Like if you're a junior designer, media designer, senior designer, how are these roles different? And how is the role of an interaction designer different from that of an information architect, different from that from a front end designer, content designer, stuff like that. These aspects of defining responsibilities sort of go hand in hand with defining these standard ways of working, because the standard way of working says at some point a designer starts their work. Well, what kind of input do they get? Who's doing work before they start their work? That interface needs to be defined, and that handoff needs to be defined. Then, what kind of skills do you need to do to develop these wireframes, to develop these information architectures? To what kind of skills do you need as a content strategist? I don't know. All of these roles and responsibilities need to be defined, sort of hand in hand with the process. So it became natural to start doing that as well. And I sort of never stopped. Like these are a couple of core aspects of what we now call design ops, but it's only been called that since I don't know for 6-8 years or something, maybe 9. Before that, it was a hobby of people who did it on the side or as part of their responsibilities. And usually it's someone with some experience, or maybe a media or a senior, who sort of every now and then took a step back and said, "Hey, why are we doing doing this way? Is everyone doing it this way? Is there a way we can improve our way of working by sharing our knowledge, standardizing our way of work, creating a template, making it clear, and writing instructions? And if so, how much improvement? Again, standardizing and measuring." And slowly I discovered other people who also did this. And that sort of grew into this design ops community. And I'm skipping a couple of steps, so feel free to ask more and more detailed questions. But this is so how I got started and how I got involved in some aspects of design operations.
That's great. So, there's another thing. So I feel like in my career, because I come from an architectural background, so
Yes.
I've been exclusively an architect for about a decade. The first decade was so we have as architects very organized ways of working. So architecture itself is quite organized in terms of operations, in terms of general conventions of communication, how those communications have to happen. What are the protocols, for example, wherever the project is, for example, if it's early design, development, then you can do whatever, throw files around. But the moment it starts to become a little like real, like, you go into schematic, you go into detailed design, then it's sort of a line on paper. It's maybe a wall on the ground. So now you start to, and it has material, it has engineering, it has MEP, mechanical engineering, plumbing, it has other people attached to that line now. So
Yeah.
so that thinking of making sure that there was a method to the madness that we were pursuing.
Yeah.
There was always a design architect, a design manager who would come in and tell us what those conventions were. But it are yeah.
Yeah, so it's partially possible because architecture has been around forever, for a lot longer than interactive design. So in the field of interactive design, we had to figure out what those standards are, and we've come a long way since, I don't know, the 50s or something, when people started doing the first design work with computers. Um, but we're still not there. So there are no government laws about what kind of elements should be in an interaction design. There are no unions that say, "Hey, these are typical roles, and you can't ask information architects to do interaction design work because they're not trained for it." These kinds of established standards and guidelines really don't exist yet. Um, the first things are beginning to appear. But even there, yeah, designers can say it depends only so many times a day, and I'm going to say it depends. It depends on the context where you're working. If there is an established design system that follows one of the big ones, like a Google Material Design or Brad Frost's molecules and atoms and stuff, atom models, yeah. Um, Sometimes that gives you some guidelines on how to develop your work and how to document your work, so that it's easier for others to take the next step and to do inspect and adapt sessions where you say, "Hey, we know what's supposed to be in here. Let's inspect it, and if not, then we send it back and it needs to be fixed." But that's still pretty recent, and like I said, the whole field is still relatively recent compared to architecture. So a lot of that work just simply definitely didn't exist in 1995 when I started.
Yeah. And that's great. So what I see is now, like, understanding what, like, having a basic, very high level understanding of design ops, right? So from like, you break it down, it's design operations, right? And when you talk about design operations, there has to be a method to the madness, then a way. There's some documentation involved, and then there has to be some sort of metrics that we need to track to make sure if it's a fail or a yes or a nay, yay, And then there's a way to sort of give people some sort of a way to move through the system, right? As you said, like career ladders, and probably that is also part of it. And then somehow being that intermediary between these two worlds, the design world and the development world, per se, or
Yeah.
so and I was trying to understand. So, and allow me 1 minute to explain why I'm asking you this question, because I think it's important for you to understand my motivation behind it, right? So the way I work is, and that's a very typical designer way of thinking. This is what I've figured out, right? It's that if I see something that works, then I need to figure out how it works, right? So I need to open that box and I need to understand, okay, someone came up with this. Of course, this is not something new. It came in from somewhere else and it got integrated into this system, for example. And then the next thought is, what do I need to do this, right? So, and now as a career, so now what I'm trying to ask you is, like, after this, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are like me, who are like, okay, what if I want to try on this hat as a career? And now, or maybe explain it from the perspective of a junior UX designer who's just a couple of years into the process, where they feel like the future being not that certain. Maybe there's a really interesting path that this might be, to someone who's like mid-level to, like, let's say 10 years, that's me, in UX. It's like, okay, so is that something that could be one thing, or what's the next? So how would these two sort of profiles deal with what you know, and what you, and maybe try to explain what you do?
Yeah. Um, So I think in your introduction or when you talked about talks I've given in the past, um, there is this distinction of design ops, the mindset, in design ops, the role. And I did not come up with that. Kate from the Nielsen Norman Group came up with that in an article called Design Ops 101 by the Nielsen Norman Group. She introduces the concept of someone having the mindset, wanting and feeling the need to operationalize the way of working of their team. And that can, like any junior can have that role, and like a project manager can have that role, but a junior designer can already have that have that mindset. They can feel the need, the urge to do this, fight for it within their team, find time for it, maybe do it guerrilla style first to have something to show, um, or ask somebody else to show it how they've done it in their work, and then say, hey, wouldn't it be good if we do that as well? That could be ways that someone who doesn't have like the job title, design operation specialist, design ops manager, and whatever the role is called, but someone who has the mindset can start to take part in design ops work, design ops activities, design ops initiatives. And if you can slowly start showing that there's a benefit for it, you can say, hey, how about I do the next one as well? And if we come up with like 5 ideas to improve the circumstances for designers, which is the short definition of design ops, if we come up with 5 ideas and we only have time to do 3, which ones are more important? Let me help prioritize the work. And then you're beginning to act as someone who has the role. Then you say, hey, it's my responsibility to coordinate this work. I'll help write the briefings for these initiatives. I'll help them forward, and I'll define metrics on how we determine whether it's actually an improvement, stuff like that. It can start as a hobby, and if you can convince people around you that it's a beneficial activity, you can start doing it, and you can even start coordinating the work. And then in my book, you have the role, even if it's part-time, even if it's only every Friday afternoon, like one of those, in plenty of companies they have like 4 hours a week where you can do something that is probably good for the company and for you. That could be a way to spend your 4 hours of time working on design ops activities. So that's something that's one way to start doing it. Then what I often advise people who actually have the design ops role, is to work with whoever's in charge of the job descriptions of and the career ladders, to write in that contributing to design ops is good for you. It's good for the team. It's good for you. You see other aspects of design work, and it helps the design ops person get volunteers to staff their projects, staff their design ops initiatives. And this is sort of a catch-22, because like you can do it as an individual with the mindset, and do it as a hobby, and then there's a sort of a gap that needs to be or a bridge that needs to be crossed before you can actually have the role. And once the role is there, you can start recruiting your volunteers. And the gap in the middle is tough. I'd hate to say that. That's where you need to fight to get the formal responsibility for this. And just like creating making sure the first content designer gets hired, or the first animator gets hired, if you have a website that actually should have animations, those first hires are really hard. At Miro, where I was allowed to do this as the role as design ops manager, other people fought that fight before I joined, so that the job description was there and I could apply and get the job. I wasn't involved. I don't know how long that fight lasted. So I don't know exactly how that worked, and that's why for me it is sort of a gap that I cannot tell too much about. So I can only say, if you have the mindset, you can start expanding the responsibilities that come with that mindset, and at some point maybe reach the time where you can take on a role part-time or full-time.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Peter, for that. But I think there's a very valuable lesson from this that I take out, and that is it's I think for a lot of people who are looking at this, and I looked at it as an alternative career because I think it comes with its own job description and its own incentives and its own sort of like accountability, right? So, and this level of, then it can just sort of become its own thing, as you said. The role itself is something that is measurable. You can see like whether someone is working on it, what's the impact, what are the processes. But however, I feel like you know, I've been part of certain startups. Then I've been part of Fortune 500 companies that are more like manufacturing related with tech elements. And then I've been part of like software, legacy software related companies. And so these are all different mindsets that we're talking about.
Yeah.
They look like they're all tech oriented, but technically what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that they can make money as quickly as possible with the product that they have, which is fair enough. Like that's why we all doing it, right? So we all need to get paid. However, anything that is out of the ordinary then becomes a blocker, right? Because it's something new. It's like this purple cow someone has just put in. It's like, okay, hold on. Like, like how do we do this? So one of the things that I learned from BCG, I worked in BCG for a little while. And so they have this consultant approach. And I think it's brilliant. So what I see is if you want to change something, you need to design an intervention. And that intervention, if it happens from within the company, is very difficult to let's say execute. But when it happens outside the company, people are more prone to understand and accept it. So what they would do is they would call agile coaches in, give us sessions. So drip feeding us with these ideas, like slowly seeping in, like, okay, we need to be agile. Okay, got it, right? So we get the hint, right? So, and I feel, and this is my next question to you, right? So I feel being a design ops consultant or bringing in a design ops consultant to work with the team for half a year, for example, right? So this is exactly what the McKinsey model is. This is what all these big companies do. What they do is they bring in consultants who understand what the system is, they measure, they try to implement certain things, and they say like, okay, so this is the book, the design op manual that we give you, for example. Now you need to hire. So this is the head count that you need to implement, right? So you need someone, two people, let's say, for example, one senior guy, one who can sort of understand what's going on and help do whatever.
Coordinate, yeah.
Yep, coordinate with the rest, and then you leave, right? So, and I see that currently you are consulting, right? So
Correct.
yeah, so what do you think about this intervention and what you're doing right now, and how did you get there?
Yeah. Let's see. So, the selling these sort of newish services as a consultant is hard. It takes several steps before you can get hired. The company your potential client needs to detect that there is a problem that needs fixing, detect that they get a feeling for which direction it might lie. Like, is it a process problem? Is it a culture problem? Is it a financial problem? Whatever. Then they need to determine that they don't have the resources to fix it. Then they need to start looking for people, find you, and then do the negotiation of contract, and then you can start to work. And then they need to be open to doing the work. Because these 7 steps before you can have meaningful impact as an outside consultant. So it's not just a super smooth path. I wish it was more smooth, because then my work would be easier. But it takes several steps before a company is ready to accept you as someone who will bring in change. And they probably need to have failed internally a couple of times before that. But once they are, then yes, all the work that you're describing that the BCGs and the McKinseys do is true. Someone needs to come in, talk probably at a level higher than where the actual change needs to happen, to stakeholders, to say, hey, this is it. Like, if you trust me, then trust me with this approach. This is my approach. My approach is, I don't know, like you said, do an analysis, do an inventory of potential problems, come up with direction for solutions, prioritize them, and start working on the first couple, and then train the people to do it themselves. That's the typical consultant model. The last one is optional. Some consultancies say, hey, we're happy to help you forever, and keep sending new consultants to your company. But the good ones train you to do it yourself. And that's that's my approach as well. If I get into contact with a potential client, I talk at the level where decisions on about the impact of the work can be made, because it like starting with design ops work takes time away from several people. It takes time away from the design leadership, from individual designers who need to contribute to design ops initiatives. It might take time away from HR if you're talking about career ladders, from IT or procurement if you want to introduce a new tool. It might take time away from, like, a lot of people if you want to build culture, a design culture in the company, which is another aspect of design ops that we haven't talked about yet. All of these things take quite some time. So somebody needs to approve that the company is going to spend time on this as a whole, or many people will spend time on this, and then you can actually start doing the work. It's like inventory, prioritize, do the first couple of initiatives, and then start training people. Um, and that's my job. Or, like, alternatively, I might get hired to temporarily replace someone in an existing design ops team. I've done that earlier, or in the beginning of 2024. I worked for 6 months in the existing design ops team of IKEA, that just had someone go on maternity leave, and they needed someone to replace her. So I was that person, and I worked on the team. It was an existing team. That's it's not necessarily, it's another way of doing consultancy. It's just hiring my brains and my hands to do this type of work, but in an organization that already has an existing team. So those assignments exist as well. I do coaching where I help others improve the circumstances for designers by working on potential org charts for designers, profiles for the next hire, descriptions of responsibilities of a coordinator of design work. Those kinds of things are more coaching activities that I do as well as a consultant. I hope that sort of answers your question.
No, this is great. Like, yeah, as you rightly were saying, started off by this caveat that it's not one solution. Like, there's no one way to fix this or answer this. And I totally get it, because there's so many moving parts to, like, for system intervention, right? So, and it's like all these cogs moving together, and then suddenly you need to put a new cog in. Like, it's not easy, right? So for sure, I've always been, like, trying, but whenever I, like, because I work as an external in a lot of companies, so I come in for a contract, 1 year, 6 months, 1.5 years, whatever. So it's like, so you have a job to do, and I like that, because it's like, okay, it's measurable. You can leave an impact, and then you can leave, instead of then just staying on and then just trying to just go with the flow, and you know how it is, right? So yeah, it's if we can't have an impact in 1.5 years, I think it's your time to move in and maybe find a better fit. Uh, I think 1.5 years is just enough time to do something significant enough, add value, right? In other words.
Yeah. It depends on the scale of the company, and many larger companies tend to move slower, so it might take more time. If you're with a startup and you can spend a week with the design leader of the startup, you can have an impact in a week.
Yeah, that's great. So now, like, one really interesting thing, and I like, just let me know if it's something that you would like to sort of slightly deep dive in without deep diving in too much.
Ooh, yeah, I have to confess, it's not my expertise. I'm more of the process freak, or the process enthusiast. Yes, and metrics and career ladders and stuff like that, and org charts. So culture is not my strongest point, but um, I've I've found some ways of building culture that aren't super weird. Every design team, and like, a design team starts at 2 people and can go to hundreds of people, has regular meetings where information is shared. And if you can sort of co-opt some of those meetings to encourage sharing that isn't necessarily like, here's my project and this is the status, and um, see you next week. But instead say, hey, here's something I learned from when I went to this conference, or here's something I learned at this workshop that I attended, or this meetup that I attended, or here's a book that I read, and why don't we all read it and discuss it apart and become like a book club. Those are ways to encourage sharing of work and encourage sharing terminology that help a team build their own culture, their own, like I said, their own jargon, their own terminology. Um, they can start speaking the same language to their stakeholders, so the stakeholders can't play one person against another, because the designers stand as one block, who all have the same values, have the same idea of how they contribute to the company. Um, these activities help build a culture like that. And then, of course, an offsite where you go to I don't know, play golf or shoot paintball or stuff like that, or do an improv class or stuff like that, help build cohesion and build a team as well. Um, those are ways that I've seen that work well to build culture, and I cannot think of others and more, but these are the ways that I've seen.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to ask you a last question, and maybe like get your sort of um, insights, right? And they don't have to be cooked insight. There might be uncooked raw insights right now, because things are really progressing quickly, right? So so we won't hold you accountable for what you say.
Thank you.
So, but jokes aside, with AI, of course, like things are changing rapidly, right? And the future, some of the things are being automated, some are being optimized, some are being completely replaced. So we're at different levels, different sort of fidelities for different things, right? So how do you see design ops sort of being affected or improved slash whatever verb you want to use, adjective you want to use
Yeah.
for this, Sam?
Yeah. If I had to put money in AI, it would be in tools that we're already using that get better through AI. So if you're using Miro or Figma to document your designs or document and discuss your designs, those tools are places where AI can work to make designers work better and faster and measurably improve their way of working. If you have a tool like Jira, I can't wait to see Jira deploy good AI that help you write your next story, or discover discrepancies or gaps or stuff like that in your documentation of the work that you want to do, or even that you have done and want to discuss with others, because that's all what these tools do. They help you create places where you can work together on the next version of the design for the product, or even the product. My money is on tools that deploy AI to make that work go better, and tools that we're already using. I do not foresee an external tool suddenly revolutionizing the way design work gets done. Yeah, so and the signs are there, like Miro in their recent like revolution of Miro 2.0, whatever series of webinars and announcements. They they are they're building in AI into many aspects of visual collaboration, including the work that designers do. They also focus on product managers and project managers and stuff like that, and even development teams or product teams doing their work better, product marketeers doing their work better, but definitely also designers. Um, and you can write a briefing and it will suggest ways that the screens for that project that you're describing might look and even how the flow might go. So it's showing up. If you're a hardcore Excel user, Excel has a Copilot built in, and you can ask it to do stuff and inspect what it did. And if you speak Python, you can change Python code that was used in the background to create the effect that you wanted to have. This is where I see AI having the biggest impact in tools that we're already using.
That's a great answer, I think, because it's very clear. And as you said, like maybe that's the next 2 or 3 years. This is where we focus on trying to see which tools we can focus on that have already like AI integrated and they're
Yeah.
becoming better. Yeah. So that's great. Peter, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can continue the session once more later and get a deeper dive into design ops per se
Yeah.
for people who are from the field.
Yeah, happy to do that. This has been a lovely experience, so I'm happy to do it again. Thank you, Ani.
Thank you so much, Peter.
The Design Hustle Podcast.